Okay, so good morning everyone. We are recording now. So let's do a quick recap of the main points from last lecture. Right, so we started with vertex covers and then we looked at a different way of looking at it. And that led us to a more general observation, which is that if you have any set of vertices S in a graph G, you delete these vertices and you look at the remaining components, right? Some of them will have odd number of vertices, we will call them odd components, and some of them will have even number of vertices, even components. However, the number of odd components plays an important role in the size of a maximum matching. In particular, you can look at the number of exposed vertices for any matching, right? Which is inversely related to, I shouldn't say inversely because it's a more formal word, but minimizing the number of exposed vertices is the same as maximizing the size of the matching, right? So the number of exposed vertices will be at least the number of odd components minus the cardinality of the set S. Right? That's fairly clear, right? And so we get this inequality that I just mentioned. The cardinality of the exposed vertices is at least this quantity on the right hand side. But this number, the number of exposed vertices, is related to the size of the matching, right? By this equation, obviously. And so that gives you the next inequality, which is that the size of the matching is at most this quantity on the right hand side. Okay, so I personally always find it difficult to remember this formula or recalling it on the fly. I find it much easier to think about the exposed vertices and then deriving this as an immediate consequence. I also think it's easier to prove it that way. Okay, good. So, what's so good about this last inequality? It gives you an upper bound on the size of the maximum matching. Of course, that upper bound could be completely useless because you could have a situation where the number of odd components is less than the size of the number of size of the set S. Right. So if this quantity is less than this quantity, right? So then what would you get? You would have a negative number here, which you'd be adding to the number of vertices and then dividing by 2. So it's just telling you that the size of the maximum matching is at most the number of vertices divided by 2, which you already know, right? So this could be a completely useless bound. Let me just say it's a useless bound if the number of odd components is less than this. In fact, even if it is equal, it doesn't tell you anything interesting. Right? However, you could have sets in your graph which actually give you a more useful bound, right? And it would be great if there was always a set for which equality holds, because then it would be a way to certify that a certain matching is a maximum matching. So the natural question arises, is there always a set S in any graph G, set S of a subset S of the vertex set, such that um, the above inequality holds with equality. Right? By above inequality, I am referring to this one. which of course is the same as the inequality above it, but then you are looking at the exposed vertices. So you can think of it in two different ways. So these are equivalent. And the answer to this is yes. And that is the famous Tut-Burge theorem. Right? And this is good because it means that you can actually convince someone that a certain matching is actually maximum. All right. So this is the same as saying the following, right? Um, so there is a, I'll state it as a corollary. So for any graph G, the size of the matching number is exactly equal to, you take the minimum over all sets for this inequality. Right? You'll try to minimize the upper bound as much as you can, and when you minimize it, it will actually give you the matching number. Okay? So it is exactly equal to the number of vertices of the graph minus the number of odd components, and I will actually put this in brackets just so that it's clear how it is derived for each subset of the vertex set. Okay, so there is always a set S for which you will actually get equality.
Okay, so sir, is it exactly the Tadbarge formula?
Right, it's exactly the Tut-Burge formula. Right.
Okay.
In fact, I think I should have been more careful. You have to say two things here, right? Of course, this will not hold with equality for every matching because every matching is not a maximum matching. Is there always a matching M and a subset S so that the inequality holds with equality? Right? That would be the correct way to say it.
Okay, so sir, if we apply this formula to bipartite graphs, then what will happen? The Tadbarge formula
Right. You tell me what you think will happen.
to bipartite graphs.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think would happen? What does it look like in the case of bipartite graphs? Like, did we see a min-max result in the case of bipartite graph?
Yeah, I mean size of maximum matching equal to size of minimum vertex cover.
Exactly. So this can be viewed as a generalization of Koenig-Egervary. I am not going to discuss the exactly how you derive it. I might actually put in this on the assignment now that you have given me this idea. So um, this is a generalization of Koenig-Egervary. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so basically Koenig-Egervary theorem says that size of maximum matching equal to size of minimum vertex cover, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
Exactly. So basically, one thing you can show. So this is actually an easy thing to do. Um, you can show that any minimum vertex cover. Okay, I need to first define a term because I did not do that yet. So okay. So the answer to this is yes, and of course, M will have to be a maximum matching, right? Because if it holds with equality, then the matching has to be as big as possible because it meets the upper bound. Right? And such sets S, which minimize the right hand side, they are called barriers of the graph. Okay, so let me just put down a definition.
So barriers need not be unique, right?
Right, right. A graph may have many barriers. We'll actually see some examples. A set S, which is a subset of the vertex set, is a barrier of a graph G if it satisfies this with equality. Right, so it's exactly okay. So all sets of the vertex set are called barriers if the right hand side for that set is exactly equal to the matching number. Okay. And the question that we asked is basically asking, is there always a barrier in any graph? And that is the Tut-Birch theorem. So this, as Aranya pointed out, is called the Tut-Birch formula. And it is a corollary of the Tut-Birch theorem. Sorry. Which says that every graph has a barrier. Okay, so there is always a set S which satisfies this as an equation. Good. So, so basically, what happened is Tut gave a
So I have just
yeah,
a question. I have just a question. So
yeah,
the Tadbert theorem says that every graph has a barrier, right?
right, exactly,
Okay, but Tadbert formula says that what is exactly the value of alpha dash g in terms of the barrier.
right. But it's an immediate corollary, right? Because a barrier is exactly a set that achieves this equality,
Okay.
right? Take if
Yeah.
you take the minimum over all sets, you will basically get the barriers of the graph,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? So it's an immediate corollary. Right, so there's the reason we are writing them separately is because generally this is called the Tut-Birch formula, and this is actually much more famous than the theorem as it is written here. In fact, back then the term barrier was not even in use, so they did not state it in these exact words, but it is
Okay.
equivalent to whatever they proved back then.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah,
So,
over the years you find much easier ways of explaining things. Yeah, go ahead.
okay, so is there any way to upper bound the number of barriers in a given graph?
Um, okay, so that is an interesting question in the context of certain graphs. So, in general, I don't know of any upper bounds that apply to all graphs, but there is a class of graphs for which there are some interesting results related to your question. I will mention them later. So, in general, I don't know any upper bound.
Okay, so does that class of graphs include bipartite graphs?
I'll tell you about it in a few minutes.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
But yeah, for general graphs, I don't know the answer to your question. All right, good. Um, right. So, are there any questions or concerns at this point? Is it clear what a barrier is? Is it clear why the Tut-Birch theorem, as stated here, immediately implies the corollary Tut-Birch formula? So, Tut proved a more specialized result in 1947. However, the Tut-Birch formula can be derived as a corollary of that. So, this result was not actually proved by Tut and Birch together. It is basically derived by Birch from Tut's theorem. But really, Tut's theorem was the most difficult part of this, which is why it is generally known as the Tut-Birch formula. Okay, so I'll tell you what Tut did. Um, yeah. Okay. So Tut was not really that interested in maximum matchings. Tut was mostly interested in um, perfect matchings. Okay. And so the question is, what does this corollary tell us when we think about perfect matchings? So I'll give that to you as a do-it-yourself exercise. Um, there was one more exercise I wanted to give you here to show that in a bipartite graph, each minimum vertex cover is a barrier. I'm not sure if the converse is true. I will have to think about it. Right, but you can at least show that every minimum vertex cover is actually a barrier. Okay. So let's talk about perfect matchings.
So I have just a question, just
Yeah.
right. So if a graph G has a perfect matching,
Mm-hmm.
so first of all, it must even number of vertices.
Right. Yeah.
And if the number of vertices is n, which is even, then the size of the maximum matching will be n by 2.
Right.
Means if
Okay.
G has a perfect matching, then the size of
So
maximum matching
okay.
will be n by 2.
So G has a perfect matching. Let's say. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, then that implies the alpha prime G equal to n by 2.
Okay.
Then if we plug this in the Tut-Birch formula,
Okay.
so that comes as n by 2 equal to half of something. So from
Good.
there, we can say n
Good.
will be equal to minimum of
Right. So n by 2 is equal to half of what is the quantity on the right hand side?
mod Vg minus minimum, yeah, minimum overall is mod Vg
Mm-hmm.
minus C or G minus S minus mod S. So we
Right?
can say that this minimum quantity is exactly n.
Mm-hmm.
And if this
Okay.
minimum quantity is exactly n, that means that each of these terms is at least n. Means
Right.
mod Vg minus C or G minus S minus mod S will be at least n.
Mm-hmm.
It
Okay.
must be at least n, because if some of this is less than n, then the minimum will be less than n.
Right. Exactly.
So that means mod v will be, so that means C odd, since mod v is exactly equal to n,
Mm-hmm.
this quantity mod v minus this thing can be at least 10 if and only if this quantity is negative. C
Right.
odd minus mod S is less than or equal to 0.
Right. Okay.
That
And
means
so
C
what
odd
does
will be
that imply?
C odd less than or equal to mod S for all a subset of Vg.
Right. And if you work that out further, it basically tells you that the number of odd components will always less than equal to the size of the set.
Yeah.
Right?
That means I think it is the one direction of Tutt's theorem, but Tutt proved the more difficult version.
Right. But this is you can go both ways, right? So in fact, this is if and only if.
Yeah. It is if and only if. It is if and only if. Yeah.
Right? So this is exactly so basically G has a perfect matching if and only if this inequality holds for every set. Right? So we have just proved Tutt's theorem. Thanks. Right? So that is theorem 16.14. No, sorry,
So
16.13.
is it exactly Tutt's one factor theorem?
It's
If you go
exactly Tutt's one factor theorem.
Tutt's one factor theorem.
Yeah. Right? So a graph G has a perfect matching if and only if the number of odd components is always less than equal to the number of vertices you delete. Let's go back to one of the graphs we saw earlier, right? So you might recall I drew this graph a few times. It's a cubic graph that does not have a perfect matching. Right? So if this is your graph G, the reason this graph does not have a perfect matching is because there is this vertex V And if you think about S as your set V, just containing one vertex, the number of odd components is going to be 3, whereas you have deleted just one vertex, right? So this inequality does not hold for this set.
So
S,
so here every component will be odd if we delete the vertex v.
right, right, exactly, right? But in particular, the number of odd components is greater than the number of vertices deleted. And in this situation, your graph will never have a perfect matching. What Tutt's theorem is saying is that the only reason for a graph to not have a perfect matching is because there is a set for which this inequality does not hold. Right? And so now, if you think about the decision problem,
So is there a polynomial time algorithm to find such a set S if the graph G doesn't have perfect matching?
yeah. So you probably know about Edmonds algorithm. I think you probably mentioned it in an earlier lecture. So it finds a
That
maximum
was
match.
regarding only for bipartite graphs.
Oh, okay, okay. But then you don't need Edmonds algorithm. Then you can just do using alternating trees, right? So basically, there is an algorithm that finds a maximum matching in any graph. And how does the algorithm convince you that it is actually a maximum matching? The same algorithm gives you barrier.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. So basically, any implementation of Edmonds algorithm should give you some certificate, right, that the answer is correct, and that certificate is actually a barrier. Right? So if you look at the decision problem, given a graph G, let me introduce one term. Let's say um, a graph G is matchable if it has a perfect matching. Okay. You will see in the next lecture why I want to introduce this term. Okay, so let's call such graphs matchable graphs. Okay. So the decision problem is decide whether G is matchable. Okay. And this problem is clearly in NP because you just show a perfect matching to your friend and that convinces them that it is a perfect matching. It has the graph is matchable. But now because of Tutt's theorem, this is also in co-NP, right? Because you just show your friend a set S for which this inequality does not hold. And that means that the graph does not have a perfect matching. This is often called Tutt's one factor theorem because back then the term that was more commonly used was one factor instead of perfect matching. Because what is a perfect matching? It is a spanning one regular subgraph. So they call these one factors. And you can imagine what a k factor is. It's a spanning k regular subgraph. So this was called Tutt's one factor theorem, also known as Tutt's perfect matching theorem. So Tutt really focused on perfect matchings. And I will tell you in a few minutes why Tutt focused on perfect matchings. Okay?
So sir, I have just a question. So when
Mhm.
you are saying that this decision problem is both NP and co-NP, means I have just a comment. So this particular decision problem that basically deciding whether a given graph G is matchable or not,
Mhm. Right.
it can be solved in polynomial time, right?
Right, right. It is in P. Right. So it is in P because of Edmonds 1965.
Yeah, Edmonds Blossom algorithm.
Yeah,
So you can
exactly.
find maximum matching and then check whether it is perfect
Yeah,
matching
so
or
you
not.
can, yeah, so finding a maximum matching and therefore finding a perfect matching are polynomial time solvable problems. And Edmonds algorithm basically will also give you, it will not just give you a maximum matching, it will also give you a barrier to certify that it is a maximum matching.
And also, sir, since you know that P is subset of NP intersection co-NP,
Mhm.
by that we can say that this problem DP belongs to both NP and co-NP. Means without using Tutt's theorem, we can
Yeah,
say.
sure, sure. That way you can do it, but I prefer to focus on NP and co-NP because those are more graph theoretical results, or those
Okay,
are the consequences of graph theoretical results.
okay,
Whereas for P, you'd actually need a algorithms result, right? So It's more graph algorithms than just graph theory. Right? So that's why I focus on NP and co-NP. Yeah, but you're right, it's NP. Good. Yeah, so I want to also add the comment that a barrier serves as a certificate to demonstrate that the matching is indeed maximum. Okay. So you could ask the decision problem, given a graph G and a matching M, is M, decide whether M is a maximum matching. And now because of the Tutt-Baird theorem, this would be in co-NP. Sorry, it would be in NP. Because in co-NP, it would mean that you would just show a matching that demonstrates that this is not a maximum matching. So because of this, this is an NP now. Depends on how you phrase your problem. Good. All right. So why was Tutt interested in perfect matchings? Well, in general, there was a lot of interest in matchings at the time. People had solved the bipartite case, uh, but the non-bipartite case was open for quite a few years. Right? You can see the difference between when Tutt proved these results and when Hall and Koenig and other folks proved their results. Right? There is a difference of, I don't know, 25 to 50 years or something. But there was another reason. You might remember we discussed Peterson when we were talking about colorings. So let's talk a bit about that. Right. So, so let's go back to Tate's theorem. Okay. So what did Tate prove? A three-connected cubic plane graph is four-phase colorable if and only if it is three-edge colorable. Right? And so that was one way to prove the four-color theorem. That you would show that all three connected cubic plane graphs are three-edge colorable. Well, what does three-edge colorable mean? It means that it has three disjoint perfect matchings that cover the entire edge set of the graph, right? Red, blue, and green, three perfect matchings. Well, so of course the question arises, is there even one perfect matching in a cubic graph, right? Do you need planarity for a single perfect matching? Do you not need planarity, right? And you might remember the false conjecture that I mentioned to you. Tate had conjectured that every cubic three connected planar graph is Hamiltonian. What is Hamiltonian? Hamiltonian is a single cycle that spans all the vertices. It's basically a two factor, right? Every vertex is degree 2, except that you want just one cycle, you don't want multiple cycles. Okay, so again, it raises the question, can we at least show the existence? Because if it is Hamiltonian, then you color the edges of the Hamiltonian cycle red and blue, and you will get two perfect matchings in the graph. But can we even show that the graph has one perfect matching? Right? And do we really need planarity? Those are very natural questions that arise from all of this history. Right? So that was one of the motivations for Tutt. In particular, Peterson did prove something back then, which is the following theorem. So this is a theorem from around the same time, 1891. It's 16.14. So if you look at three regular graphs or cubic graphs, right, in general, they may not have a perfect matching, like this graph that we have drawn here. But this graph has cut edges. So could that be a problem? Could it be that if we don't allow cut edges, we get perfect matchings? And that is actually true. So every three regular graph, three regular as in the same as cubic, without cut edges, which is the same as saying that it is two edge connected, has a perfect matching. Or maybe let me just say is matchable. Okay, so that is something Peterson proved back in 1891. He jumped to the conclusion that in the case of planar graphs, these graphs will actually be Hamiltonian, which we know is not true, and that is how we gave a false proof of the four-pillar theorem, right? Um, but without planarity, he was already able to show that you always have a perfect matching in the graph. Except that Peterson's proof was fairly complicated. I have not read it, and I don't know how many people these days would go and read it, because Tutt gave an alternative proof of this, which is a direct consequence of Tutt's theorem. And that was one of the motivations for Tutt to prove this result. Right? So that is why Tutt was particularly focused on perfect matchings and he proved this result. So we'll see a proof of this today. I think we have enough time for this. This is due to Tutt. Are there any questions or concerns at this point? So we haven't proved Tutt's theorem yet. We won't be proving Tutt's theorem. We will get it directly as a consequence of the Tutt-Berge theorem. So this is what we will prove in the next week. Right? And it immediately implies Tutt's theorem. We did the derivation here. But since it requires a longer discussion, I don't want to go into proving the Tutt-Berge theorem today. Instead, I want to look at this consequence of Peterson's theorem and then start the Tutt-Berge theorem proof next week. Okay. So let G be any three regular graph without cut edges. What do we need to show? Let's go to Tutt's theorem. We need to show that for every subset of the vertex set, the number of odd components is less than equal to the size of the set. So let's consider any subset of the vertex set. Okay. Let's say I look at a case where we have 6 vertices. The number does not matter really. So when you delete the vertices, you might get some odd components. Let me draw more odd components just for the sake of example. And you might get some even components, right? So I'm following a certain convention here. I put the even components as squares and odd components as circles, right? So these are the even components of G minus S. These are the odd. Our goal is to show that you actually cannot have this situation. You cannot have 7 odd components and just 6 vertices in your set S. Right? It has to be less than equal to 6 in general. So how do we prove this? Any thoughts? I'm going to make all of you complete the proof. This is our goal. Remember, every vertex has degree 3, right? Okay, let me give you a hint. Let's look at a component K. Yeah, sure, why not? Supposing K is an odd component of G minus S. Right? If there are no odd components, then you are done because 0 is less than equal to any positive number. So we may assume that there are at least some odd components. Let's look at one odd component. I want to think about this quantity. How many edges are coming out of K? Also, if an edge comes out of K, where is the other end of this edge?
It must be in S.
It has to be in S, right? Because these are components after
Okay.
deleting the set S. So, okay, good. Every edge that comes out of K has to have the other end in the set S. So now I'm looking at the cut. I'm looking at the whole cut corresponding to this component. What can we say about this quantity?
At least two.
At least 2. Okay, good. At least 2. Why?
Because we don't have any cut edges, right?
Right. No cut edges. Since there do not exist any cut edges in the graph G. Good. Okay. So it's at least 2. Great. That is true for not just the odd components, that is actually true for all components. Right? So this is actually true for any component. Good. But I claim that for odd components, you can say something stronger. Can be made stronger for odd components. Does anybody see that? I'll give you a hint. It is related to something you proved on one of your assignments.
Partial of V of K must be odd, right?
Right, exactly. This is from assignment 1. On assignment 1, I think it was problem 1, you proved that the the cardinality of K has the same parity as the cardinality of the cut. Right. So I should yeah. Okay. So that's something you proved on assignment 1. You didn't prove it just for 3 regular graphs. We call them odd graphs, which is a weird terminology because now we are saying odd component is odd number of vertices. But in that assignment, we use the term odd graph for a graph where every vertex has odd degree. And for such graphs, you showed that the cardinality of the component, or if you look at any set X, its cardinality has the same parity as the cardinality of the cut corresponding to that set. It's basically the handshaking lemma, applied in a more fancy manner. Okay, it's basically a degree counting argument. Okay, so now what can you say?
So we can make that to 3, right?
Right, exactly. So this implies that for all odd components k of the graph G minus S, the cut corresponding to that component has size at least 3. Okay? So for each odd component here, we are going to have at least 3 edges coming out. Good. Where are these edges going? They are going into S, right? All of these edges are coming out of some odd component and they are going into the set S. But this is a cubic graph. How is this possible? How can you have 7 multiplied by 3, 21 edges going into the set S, which has only 6 vertices?
Exactly. Because it will be at most 18.
Exactly. You can't have 21 edges because you can have at most 18 edges coming out of this, right? This is at most 18, right? And here you have at least 3 for each of them. Okay? So, well, um, note that partial of S is at most is at most 3 times the cardinality of the set S, right? And this, right? So we get this inequality, and we have this one here for each component is at least 3, right? But if you sum up the edges coming out of all the components, that has to be less than equal to the sets coming out of the edges coming out of S. So maybe I should put it this way. Right? And each of these is at least 3. Right? And so this implies that the number of odd components is less than equal to the number of vertices. Okay? Because this holds for every single set, by Tutt's theorem, we are done. Good. Is this clear? Are all the inequalities here clear? Are there any questions or concerns? Okay. Right, so that's a very easy proof of Peterson's theorem. You just need to now prove Tutt's theorem. And even that is significantly easier than Peterson's original proof of this result. Right, so it is generally called Peterson's theorem, but typically this is the proof you will see because it's much easier. Okay, so it turns out you can actually prove stronger results. Not only is the graph going to be matchable, you can actually use the same proof and you will have to think a bit more about it to prove something stronger. Um, okay, see you, Aranya. Bye. Okay, so let me just put down a definition here. So maybe I won't write down a definition. There is a stronger result that you can prove. Um, so it says the following. So let G be a cubic graph without cut edges. Let me just say cubic two-edge connected graph, right, which is the same thing. You can actually show that each edge of the graph G belongs to some perfect matching. So using similar arguments as above. Okay, so not only is the graph matchable, but for every single edge of the graph, you can find a perfect matching that contains that particular edge. Okay, um, yeah, I might give you this problem as a do it yourself or a try it yourself exercise, or I might even put it on the assignment. I haven't thought about it. Okay. The reason I'm mentioning this is actually related to one of Aranya's questions, but he has already left. It's okay, we are recording the meeting. So there is a class of graphs called matching covered graphs, which are very important in the current trends of matching theory that I myself work in. So these are connected graphs, and you have another property, which is actually the more important property. Each edge belongs to some perfect matching, right? So they are generally called matching covered graphs in the current research literature. Okay. And another way of thinking about this result that I mentioned is that cubic two-edge connected graphs are matching covered, right? Because they're already connected, that's by definition. And on top of that, each edge belongs to a perfect matching. Right? So one of the questions that was asked is that is there a bound or is there some result about the number of barriers in a graph? So I don't know the answer to that, but there is some interesting theory about barriers for matching covered graphs. So in matching covered graphs, what happens is that you can look at the maximal barriers and they form a partition of the vertex set. And this partition is very useful in results in matching theory. So, fact beyond this course, in matching covered graphs, the maximal barriers form a partition of the vertex set of the graph. This is beyond this course. Okay?
Sir,
Yeah, go ahead.
what about decision problem of finding whether a graph is matching covered?
Right. So let's think about it, right? So what do you want to do? You want to check for every edge E equal to UV whether there is a
Yeah.
perfect matching containing this edge.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
remove that edge and check for perfect match.
Remove that edge, or you mean something else? Do you want to remove the edge, or do you want to remove the two vertices that are the ends of that edge?
Yeah, two vertices too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you remove
Okay.
the two
Yeah.
vertices and you check whether the remaining graph is a perfect matching, right? So that you can do in polynomial time. So
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
check that graph is matching covered in polynomial time.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So what we know is that the maximal barriers form a partition of the vertex set. This is a result due to Kotzig from 1970s, I think. Not sure. And so that gives you that tells you that you can't have lots of maximal barriers because it's a partition of the vertex set, right? So at most you can have n maximal barriers, but it doesn't tell you anything about the number of barriers because a barrier might contain smaller barriers. Okay. All right. Anyways, that is beyond the course. So let's come back to what we have proved. So we proved Peterson's theorem, and in the next lecture, we will be proving the Tut-Berge theorem. So that will be Monday.
So how many more classes are remaining?
Monday to Friday. That's it.
Only 1 week.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, I'm here for another 5 minutes in case there are any other questions or concerns. But the lecture is officially over. If you are leaving, have a good weekend.
I don't have a question about the topic, okay, but I want to ask, tentatively, do you have like a time when you will release the next assignment?
The next assignment. Yeah. So
Yes.
let me just stop recording.